Ladies and gentlemen, there exists a peculiar danger that has little to do with illness, but everything to do with vision. I speak not of the eyes that see colors and shapes, but of the inner gaze that penetrates beneath appearances, that reads the subtle gestures, the fleeting expressions, the unspoken tensions that govern human interaction. This gaze belongs to those rare individuals who perceive what others do not. Such persons possess what may be called differentiated perception. They enter a room and sense immediately the hidden drama, who hides resentment behind a smile, who bleeds in silence behind laughter, who lies through their words appear convincing. They see through masks as if they were made of glass. What most people repress, they encounter. What most ignore, they cannot help but notice. At first glance, one might think this is a gift, a superior advantage in life. But upon closer examination, we discover it is more often a burden than a blessing. Why? Because human society does not thrive on naked truth. It thrives on shared illusions, on the subtle agreements to ignore what lies beneath. Friendships endure because we do not expose every secret. Workplaces function because we do not name every unspoken rivalry. Marriages survive because both partners allow certain mysteries to remain veiled. But imagine the soul who cannot look away, who cannot pretend not to see. Such a person finds themselves estranged. Their presence unsettles others, for to be near them is to feel naked, exposed, without refuge in the familiar masks we all depend upon. It is not their intention to wound, yet their very perception disturbs the fragile equilibrium of social life. The danger, therefore, is not madness, but overconsciousness. When the unconscious becomes too conscious, when what should remain hidden is dragged prematurely into the light, the psyche trembles. To perceive too much is to lose the protective veil of ignorance that allows ordinary life to proceed. And without that veil, isolation becomes inevitable. History and clinical observation alike reveal the same fate: exhaustion, alienation, and despair. Many such individuals retreat, unable to bear the weight of continuous perception. Others collapse into bitterness, resenting a world that seems blind by choice. And yet, there are a few, very few, who take another path. They do not flee from their gift, nor do they allow it to consume them. Instead, they transmute it. They become artists, mystics, philosophers, healers, those who give symbolic form to what they perceive, so that society can receive the truth indirectly, without being shattered by its raw force. Thus, the choice for such individuals is stark: destruction or transformation. To see too much is dangerous, yes, but if endured, if integrated, it may lead to extraordinary vision, a contribution to humanity that ordinary eyes could never provide. The hidden truth, then, is this: the human psyche protects itself with blindness, but evolution advances through those few who dare to see. Their fate is perilous, their solitude profound, yet without them, humanity would remain forever asleep beneath its own illusions. There is a peculiar danger in life that we rarely acknowledge, a danger that arises not from external threats or illness, but from vision itself. I speak of the inner gaze that penetrates beyond appearances, the sight that does not rest on surfaces, but seeks what lies hidden beneath. Some individuals, rare in number, are born with or acquire a heightened perception that allows them to detect the slightest tremor in a voice, the fleeting shift in expression, the subtle tremble of a gesture. They sense the atmosphere of a room the moment they step into it. They discern lies even when words are perfectly composed. They detect grief concealed behind laughter, and they notice hostility wrapped in courtesy. They see through the fragile masks that most of us wear, often without even being aware that we wear them. At first, such perception may seem to be an advantage. Who would not wish to detect dishonesty before it causes harm? Who would not wish to know the truth of a situation without being misled by appearances? Surely one might assume this is a superior faculty, a rare gift bestowed upon a fortunate few. But the reality is far more complex. For the very capacity to see what others cannot comes with a profound cost. Human society does not thrive on complete transparency. It thrives on shared illusions, on the small agreements to overlook, to forgive, to ignore. Friendships are built as much upon what is not said as what is spoken. Families endure because certain truths are left unexamined. Communities function because unconscious tensions are veiled beneath ritual, politeness, and convention. These unspoken veils are not lies in the malicious sense, they are protections, necessary illusions that preserve harmony. Now imagine the individual who cannot participate in these protections, who cannot fail to see. They live in constant exposure to truths others neither recognize nor wish to face. They sense the silent resentments that family members conceal. They perceive the despair in a colleague's forced smile. They detect the envy, the bitterness, the quiet betrayals that move invisibly beneath the surface of human interaction. For such a person, ordinary social life becomes unbearable because every situation demands a blindness they cannot achieve. Their very presence unsettles others, for to stand before them is to feel revealed, as though one's innermost secrets were laid bare without consent. It is not cruelty that drives this, but perception itself, a perception too differentiated to be ignored. The consequence is often isolation. Relationships falter, not because the seer lacks affection, but because others instinctively withdraw from the discomfort of exposure. Workplaces become hostile, for the individual's unspoken awareness disrupts the hidden agreements that allow groups to function smoothly. The gift, if we call it that, becomes a burden, pressing upon the mind with relentless clarity. The danger is not madness, but an excess of consciousness. When what ought to remain in shadow is dragged prematurely into light, the soul trembles beneath the strain, and yet within this peril lies the possibility of transformation. Those few who can bear the burden without breaking often turn their vision outward, shaping it into art, philosophy, or healing. They become mirrors for humanity, offering symbols rather than raw truths, allowing others to approach the hidden without being consumed by it. But to reach that point requires immense courage, for the first movement of this path is always alienation. The danger of seeing what others do not is therefore twofold. It can destroy by isolating the one who sees, or it can elevate by compelling them to transmute perception into wisdom. This is the hidden truth. The psyche shields itself through blindness, and society survives on illusion. But those rare individuals who cannot help but see remind us that beyond the veil lies a deeper reality. Dangerous, yes, but such individuals who possess an unusual depth of perception do not merely stand apart because of what they see, but because of what their vision disrupts. Human beings are bound together by invisible agreements, collective illusions that allow social life to continue without constant fracture. These illusions are not malicious, nor are they trivial. They are the quiet, unconscious contracts that hold communities together. The agreement to accept a smile at face value, to overlook the envy hidden behind a compliment, to ignore the subtle hostility that simmers beneath politeness. Without these tacit pacts, the social fabric frays because no relationship could endure the full weight of undisguised truth. Society depends in part on masks. When a person arises who perceives beyond these masks, something in the collective order is disturbed. Imagine the atmosphere of a gathering where such a person is present. While others laugh and engage in light conversation, this individual feels the sharp current of unspoken rivalry, the bitterness in a strained marriage, the silent grief of a friend. Their perception is not chosen. It is automatic, involuntary. They cannot unsee what has revealed itself, but in seeing, they inadvertently disturb the equilibrium. Their silence itself can feel accusatory. Their presence becomes unsettling, not because they act with hostility, but because others sense, often unconsciously, that their pretenses are transparent before this gaze. This is why those who see too much often find themselves alone. It is not that they reject society, but that society rejects them. Their insight, though unspoken, generates discomfort, for it reveals what others prefer to remain hidden even from themselves. The collective thrives on mutual blindness, on a kind of unconscious conspiracy that allows people to live together without constant conflict. To tear away that veil prematurely is to wound, even if the exposure is unintended. Thus the seer becomes a kind of exile, not because they wish to separate, but because their very being disrupts the fragile scaffolding of collective illusions. The paradox is profound. What should be a supreme advantage, the ability to perceive truth, becomes a curse in ordinary human affairs. Social life is not built on truth alone, but on the careful balance between truth and concealment. Too much concealment and relationships decay into lies. Too much truth and they shatter beneath its weight. Those who see too much cannot help but tip this balance, even in silence, even with the best intentions. Their gaze carries with it the force of unveiling, and that unveiling destabilizes the unconscious agreements that bind people together. And so, the danger lies not only within the individual who perceives, but within the social order that depends on illusion. The one who sees becomes a living contradiction, admired for depth, feared for clarity, and often shunned for a truth they never sought to impose. The tragedy is that society needs such visionaries, yet resists them. It is shaped by their insights, yet it exiles them. For they remind us that our harmony is not built upon truth alone, but upon carefully woven veils that protect us from seeing too much too soon. Isolation becomes the inescapable fate of those who perceive too much. And this isolation does not arise from hostility or rejection in its obvious forms, but from something far more subtle, the discomfort others feel in their presence. To encounter someone who sees beneath one's words, who notices the hidden tremor of emotion, who intuits resentment or desire before it is ever spoken, is to feel exposed in a way that few can tolerate. Most people, though they may not admit it, rely on the assumption that their inner world is invisible, safely hidden behind gestures, phrases, and masks. When that assumption is shattered, even wordlessly, the instinct is to withdraw. For the one who perceives, this withdrawal is devastating, for it is rarely about something they have done, but rather about who they are. They may not speak the truths they see, yet their very silence carries weight, as if it were a mirror reflecting back what others would rather ignore. The friend who feels too scrutinized begins to avoid them. The colleague who senses their quiet awareness grows uneasy. The partner who feels unmasked begins to resent their gaze. It is not malice, but instinctive self-preservation that drives this distancing. No one wishes to stand perpetually naked before another's eyes. And so, the one who sees too deeply finds themselves alone, not by choice, but by consequence. This solitude is more painful than ordinary loneliness, for it is accompanied by an acute sense of difference. The world continues to move along its familiar patterns. Conversations flow, groups form, laughter rises in gatherings, but for the one with differentiated perception, none of it feels solid. Beneath every smile they see tension, beneath every story they sense contradiction. Beneath every relationship, they detect fractures waiting to emerge. To engage in casual small talk becomes impossible, for they are pulled irresistibly toward the undercurrents, unable to enjoy the surface play that sustains human connection. They do not reject others, yet their inability to remain blind excludes them from belonging. Over time, the psychological toll of such exclusion grows heavy. The constant awareness becomes exhausting, like carrying an uninvited burden that never rests. Their nervous system feels raw, overexposed to the emotional weather of every room they enter. The very sensitivity that grants them insight drains their strength, because they are never free from the influx of signals that others easily ignore. What appears to the outsider as detachment or aloofness is, in truth, a defensive retreat, an attempt to protect themselves from the overwhelming flood of impressions. The tragedy is that these individuals often long for closeness more intensely than others. They wish to share, to connect, to be part of the communal rhythm, but their perception denies them this ease. They must carry the weight of truths they cannot speak and impressions they cannot unsee. Their isolation is therefore not simply external, but internal, a solitude of the spirit, born from the knowledge that what binds others together will always dissolve in their presence. It is this solitude, inevitable and unrelenting, that marks the fate of those who see too much. The true danger for those who see too much is not that they lose touch with reality, but that they come to see reality with a clarity so intense that it burns away the protections most people depend upon. Madness, as we commonly think of it, is a descent into confusion, a fragmentation of thought, a collapse of meaning. But the peril here is of an opposite kind. It is not confusion, but over-clarity, not fragmentation, but an excess of wholeness, not the loss of meaning, but the crushing weight of too much meaning. It is the condition of overconsciousness, when what should remain hidden in the depths of the unconscious is dragged relentlessly into the light of awareness. The human psyche is not designed for constant exposure. Just as the body requires shelter from the sun, the mind requires shelter from the blinding glare of total consciousness. Our dreams, our instincts, our rituals, and our collective myths all serve as veils, softening the full intensity of existence, keeping us from being overwhelmed by truths we are not ready to face. Without these veils, the psyche stands naked before reality, and the result is exhaustion, disorientation, and a sense of being perpetually at odds with the ordinary rhythms of life. For most, the unconscious acts as a reservoir that holds what is too painful, too complex, or too immense to integrate. But for the one with heightened perception, the walls of this reservoir are thin, and what should remain submerged rushes forth unbidden. This is why their lives so often collapse into alienation. It is not that they seek separation, but that the sheer intensity of their perception prevents them from sharing in the illusions that bind communities together. Small talk feels impossible, for every word carries layers of hidden meaning. Social conventions appear hollow, for they see the forces simmering beneath them. Even love, which for Nye provides the deepest bond, becomes fragile, for intimacy demands a measure of blindness, a willingness to accept another's mask without tearing them away. Without this protective blindness, relationships strain under the weight of unfiltered truth. The danger of overconsciousness extends even deeper. To see what others repress is to confront not only their hidden fears and desires, but also one's own. The same heightened perception that exposes the secret wounds of others inevitably turns inward, dissolving the comforting barriers within the self. Shadows that others can safely deny rise insistently to the surface. The person becomes unable to rest in ignorance, unable to escape from the parts of their own psyche that most would never dare to face. The cost of such vision is therefore doubled: isolation from others and an unrelenting confrontation with oneself. This condition cannot be mistaken for instability. On the contrary, it is often accompanied by a fierce lucidity, a sharpness of mind, a depth of insight that astonishes those who encounter it. But lucidity without respite becomes unbearable. Just as a flame burns away its own fuel, so the mind that sees too much risks consuming itself. The danger lies in this unrelieved exposure, this relentless consciousness that denies both rest and illusion. It is not madness, but a kind of clarity that corrodes the foundations upon which ordinary life is built. Those who carry the burden of heightened perception are forced into a stark confrontation with destiny. Either their gift consumes them in isolation and exhaustion, or they learn to transform it into something larger than themselves. This ability to see what others do not cannot be extinguished. It is not a skill that can simply be set aside. It is an orientation of the psyche, an unchosen faculty that continuously exposes hidden patterns and unconscious truths. Left unintegrated, it corrodes the individual from within, producing despair and alienation. Yet if the individual can endure the weight of this perception long enough, if they can channel its relentless intensity into creation, then what once threatened destruction becomes the seed of extraordinary transformation. Transformation begins when the individual recognizes that the truths they perceive cannot be handed to others raw. People cannot bear direct exposure to what they have spent lifetimes concealing. But truths can be clothed in form, woven into art, expressed through philosophy, encoded in symbols, conveyed in stories, rituals, and metaphors. In these indirect expressions, others can approach the hidden gradually, without shattering the defenses their psyches require. The painter who captures the unspoken grief of an age, the poet who articulates the tension between appearance and reality, the philosopher who illuminates the unconscious assumptions of a culture, these are often individuals who once felt crushed by perception until they found a way to transmute it into creative expression. In this sense, the danger of differentiated perception is also its promise. The same gaze that unsettles ordinary social life can serve as a beacon when directed beyond the personal. What isolates an individual in private circles may inspire an entire culture when translated into universal form. Many of humanity's saint transformative figures were precisely those who endured this burden and refused to allow it to annihilate them. Instead, they learned to carry it as one carries a flame, carefully, cautiously, yet with the awareness that its light was meant to illuminate more than themselves. The choice, however, is never easy. Transformation demands sacrifice. It often requires stepping fully into solitude, embracing the exile rather than resisting it, and using that space to cultivate depth. It calls for a confrontation with one's own shadow, the willingness to be pierced by truths as mercilessly as one perceives them in others. Only through this inner work does perception cease to be a destructive force and become instead a source of wisdom. The process is painful, often lifelong, yet it is the only path that prevents the gift from collapsing into curse. Thus, the paradox resolves itself. To see too much is perilous, but it is also necessary for humanity's evolution. Without such individuals, societies would remain stagnant, trapped in illusions they never question. But with them, if they survive the burden and transform it, new possibilities emerge, new depths of understanding, new forms of beauty and truth. The destiny of those who see what others cannot is therefore suspended between two poles: destruction, if they remain crushed beneath the weight of vision, or transformation, if they find the strength to turn that vision into a gift for the world. To see what others cannot is both a burden and a destiny. The choice is yours. Be destroyed by vision or be transformed by it. Fade to black. Subtle background music fades out.